story time. Meanwhile, a supply run led by Daryl, Glenn, and others at a grocery store, I mean, I would put Sasha in there for sure, goes awry when a crashed helicopter causes the roof to collapse, unleashing a horde of walkers. Beth's boyfriend, Zach, is killed during the chaos. Back at the prison, a young survivor named Patrick falls ill and dies in the showers, reanimating as a walker, hinting at a new threat.
I wondered if I could just add timeline here because it's the start of the season.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, yeah.
Yeah.
And a time jump.
Yeah.
According to the wiki, and I'm going to go off on one about the wiki in a moment, this episode takes place on January 26th, which is day 520 post the turn. So Judith is 6 months old, which looks about right. January 26th, I'm going to put a big question mark over because it doesn't look like winter. But here we are. I think we're doing seasonal suspension of disbelief for the rest of the series.
I mean, the whole series, because in the book, by this point, they'd had some issues with weather and snow. And they didn't get to put that in the show because it doesn't really snow in Georgia. No. And also they do film some in the winter, but mostly, I think, through the summer, if I remember right.
So Rick's been awake for like almost a year and a half. So we're far in now. So, and Bob has been found a week before this episode takes place. So day 513 is when they come across Bob Stookie. That was the other event that the wiki mentioned for this episode.
It's kind of cool that it's just past New Year's for them too. January.
I was
26th.
thinking that. Yeah.
Cool.
So this would be 2012 in the Apocalypse timeline.
Okay, cool. Karen, what did you must have liked this one since you wanted to be on. How was it to revisit in general?
It was good. Actually, I rewatched this one quite a few times. It's not like my favorite episode, but I think I wanted to podcast with you about it because my perception is that it gets a lot of grief for not being like explosive or an exciting episode. In relation to like other season premieres, like certainly season 5, that premiere has like literal explosion, and quieter character moments too. Yeah. But this premiere is a little slower.
It resolves a cliffhanger, so it's really. Yeah. I mean, those 2 episodes are 2 of my favorites of the whole series. Season 4 finale and 5 intro.
Yeah. So I think I wanted to come on and defend it a bit because I think it's a very solid season premiere and it's really good about giving us context about the state of the main characters while introducing us to new ones. And I think it lays out a good thesis that it answers at the season finale, meaning that I think season 4 is actually one of the most consistently taught and like comprehensive seasons of the series.
Oh yeah, one of the best, I would say. Yeah, so. I mean, this is Scott Gimple's first episode as showrunner, and I think it's kind of cool to start with a time gap because he can come in and make some changes to show his new direction. But I compare it kind of to season 3 and 4 of Fear the Walking Dead, where Dave Erickson left as showrunner and Ian Goldberg and Adam Chambliss came in. And there are some changes here to the story, but I feel like it organically follows really well to what's come before. And I think that's probably because Scott Gimple was a big part of the show. He became the showrunner, I presume, because he'd written some of the best episodes. But with Fear the Walking Dead, they just swept away everything and totally went a new direction, even ignoring who the characters were at their core. So I think this is the way to do it rather than what Fear the Walking Dead did. But anyway, I don't know why I'm saying this right now. I liked the episode. I thought it was a really good vibe. It was, it feels like it expanded. It's kind of a new direction, but more of an expansion of what was already happening. And it's got a great little set piece with the zombies in the big spot, so it is exciting, I think. But more than that, it's full of little character moments and just new things. So I thought it was great.
And my second reason for being intrigued with this episode is, I don't know why, but I'm always like looking for the best episode to present to my non-Walking Dead friends. Yes. Like one where they can easily access the characters and the storyline without much context. And I think this is a good candidate because we get time with each character, like you just said. and or group of characters, and the themes are like really easily understood, if not like explicitly stated.
Yeah, a little bit too on the nose sometimes.
Yeah, but I think I just always want to like it's an ego validation thing that I always want to prove to my friends that Walking Dead is like first and foremost a drama, like a character study, and then the zombies are backdrop.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, one other thing I forgot to say up top, but because I was busy welcoming in Karen, but it's been like 3 weeks since you were here, Lucy, and I'm glad you're back and I missed you. So,
yay.
Oh, buddy,
we all missed you.
I know. I think the last time, 3 weeks. It's this weird nebulous time between Christmas and New Year where you just get confused about what day it is. And I was so jazzed to be watching The Walking Dead again.
Yeah.
And I really agree with like all that Karen said. I think season 4 is probably one of my favorite seasons. And it's funny because I'm quite critical of Gimple, but I think this season is him at his best. I think this is actually a really strong season. And as a season opener, I loved this one. The set piece in the middle is so cool. There's so much to enjoy. There were some bits that I really didn't enjoy, and we'll talk about those, but overall I think it's a really strong episode.
So just to kind of stick it in here, the title 30 Days Without an Accident is a good title, I think, for this episode because it's about how calm things have gotten and how they've used that to progress and bring new people in and be more civilized and have story time and farming and everything. But that title is also ominous because when you hear something like that, you know that an accident is coming. And we know damn well it means we're going to see something bad happen. And I think zombies falling through the roof at the big spot was the big one, but there's also Rick encountering this dangerous woman. And also, I think just the idea that Rick's pacifism and disengagement can't last long, especially in hindsight. I mean, I think in the moment you wondered, oh, is this going to be the new Rick? Is that going to be interesting? But in hindsight, we know he gets much more violent than he's ever been before later on in the series.
Yeah.
So anyway. All right, Karen, what's your first point?
I'm going to start with low-hanging fruit or low-hanging plants, as it were. I'm going to start with the cold open because it goes right into what you were saying about how we open not on Rick's face, but it's a pan across these verdant plants and flowers. The birds are singing. There's a wide shot where Rick looks out at various animal pens and stables, and we see garden beds. And all of this is communicated to us visually. It's showing us, it doesn't tell us about the growth and the progress that our survivors have made in the 6 months between seasons 3 and 4. How much progress they made in peacetime. And later we confirm that Michonne has yet to encounter the governor, or nobody's encountered the governor. So they've had these 6 months of peace, or at least 30 days of peace. And then there's obviously this heavy-handed metaphor of Rick's gun buried in the field. Again, we see this. We're not told that that Rick has chosen to abstain from violence to preserve his humanity, I guess, and to be a pacifist. But we know that, like, however much he tries to shield himself from brutality, it always finds him. As later on, the woman in the woods, Clara, she is the one who initiates to him. She initiates interaction with him. So harsh reality of the apocalypse always finds him.
Yeah.
And he's trying to shield himself from reality by emptying the gun magazine and throwing it away, and also plugging his ears with hymnal music. And I did some research. It's Precious Memories by John B.F. Wright, and it was written in the 1920s. And Wright was a farmer himself who wrote over 500 songs, and he wrote Precious Memories to process the grief of losing his 5-year-old son. He wanted to go back to the happier time in his life, and this hymn recalls like the rosier world before the fall, before everything crumbled to death. So yeah.
Oh my God.
And next season, early on, he'll be in a church chopping some people up.
Yep.
So
yeah.
Nice try, Rick, but you can't avoid it.
You can't pull yourself away from it. But I just like how it's like visually communicated that there's progress.
I remember feeling like I kind of said this already, but oh, this is weird. And there's this whole, we hear about a council. So not only is he trying to abstain from violence and ignore, like you see the walkers there and he's got his earbuds in, and when he takes them out, you can hear, and he puts them back in. Like, I don't even want to deal. And there's a council. So you know that he's also abdicated leadership. And, I remember feeling like this is a really interesting progression for him, but will it be good for the show? Like, will I enjoy this? You know, I didn't know. And if they had kept that as a characteristic of his through the rest of the series, I think it really would have been challenging to build stories around it, maybe, where the central part of the show is violence and conflict. And here's the main character. No, I don't want to deal with that. I don't know if it would have worked, you know, but it's an interesting development, at least for now.
I'm trying to like reframe how I look at Rick in these things, because it's almost like he's an addict recovering from something. Like, he can't even let himself dabble in a little light shooting lest he become Red Rick. And I find that a really interesting way in which he kind of catches himself and feels that he's either all or nothing. He's either covered in blood, waving a gun around, screaming what, or he's a silent farmer. Like, there's no in between. Yeah. And I find that lack of moderation quite an interesting character flaw to kind of play with in the next couple of seasons. I think it's going to drive us a bit crazy at some points, but I think at other points it will be interesting for the storylines.
I mean, that happens with a lot of the characters. Morgan's a big example.
Oh, God, Morgan, yeah.
You know, all or nothing. He's either he won't harm a fly or he kills everything he sees. Even Michonne, like when she goes through that bad experience with those kids that we keep bringing up, and then she won't trust anyone at all after that, you know, to come to the town. So it's sort of, I think, a pitfall of, or I don't know if it's a pitfall, but it's easy to fall into that as a writer on this show, I feel like.
I was going to bounce off Karen's point and talk about the kind of new normal. There's a sense, I always love the sense in a season opener of like, it's like the first day back at school, so you kind of see where everyone is and where we're at. So I thought I might talk a little about that. Carl and Rick have this really cute interaction about Violet the pig, which introduces this storyline about Carl pushing back against being a kid, but still having some very kid-like tendencies, as he should. Like, he's been up all night reading comics, he's naming the pigs, but at the same time, he's uncomfortable sitting in story time, and has sort of had his eyes opened to the bigger dangers of the world. And then, of course, Carol puts him in an impossible position later in the episode. We check in with Carol and Daryl. Daryl's become kind of a hero, a leader. We see him have this interaction with Patrick, who I love. That little kid is cute. I mean, he's not a little kid, he's a teenager, but he's just such a cute little guy. And I'm really sad that this is the only episode we get to see Patrick in, because I love his interactions with Carl. And this interaction with Daryl is just so genuine and heartfelt. And obviously, Carol and Daryl have the cute little "I liked you first" interaction. We find out that
Pookie again.
They bring up Pookie.
Wait, that was already in it before?
Which Pookie? One? I think so. Pookie.
Yeah.
Is it in season 2 or 3?
I don't remember now. Oh, from 3.
Yeah.
I mean, for all you Daryl Carol shippers, I mean, I'm sure that made you happy. It's their little nickname for each other, like a term of endearment. They bring it up again in season 9, 3. I think. Yeah. She did in Seed in the premiere.
Outside, when they were sitting outside the prison.
Yeah. When they're like asking about the back robes or something.
Okay. Because I was wondering, because this felt like, I guess that was sort of the seed of their, because you know how they always tease each other after this, and like in season, I think 10 or maybe it's 9, when he says she's his best friend and she's like, what are you, 10?
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny. And I feel like we're seeing the start of that dynamic between them. It felt here like really the start of it to me, because she calls him Pookie and then he kind of goes and butts against her, you know. But I guess she had already called him that last season, like you said. So it kind of started there. Yeah.
Other scene setting that we find out, Rick's been letting more people in. Like Karen says, we've got it looks like a fairly good setup at the prison. The prison's looking good. It's looking much more homely. Sidebar, Beth has like the nicest room. It reminds me of like when you're a teenager and you put like all sorts of crap on
Posters.
your walls, like pictures, posters. I was like, ooh, Beth's cell is lovely. We catch up with Karen, who I had forgotten is kind of introduced at the end of season 3. And we see that she and Tyrese have a relationship. We see that Tyrese is uncomfortable with killing the walkers in a non-combat situation. I did wonder, we see Karen at the fence stabbing walkers on fence duty. Is that how she gets infected? And that's why none of the rest of the gang do, because they're not on fence duty at that particular point.
Because, we don't know whether this sickness has anything to do with the zombie virus for sure, but it seems like it does because it's so quick acting. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether it does or not. All that matters is they get really sick, and we know anyone who dies becomes a walker, a zombie. But I think later on in like season 8, Father Gabriel, when he's covering himself with guts, gets some in his eye, and then he gets really sick. And so you get the sense that it is possible to sort of get, maybe it's like a mild case of the zombie virus that doesn't actually kill you, if you don't get bitten, but you just get enough gunk in the wrong place or something like that. I don't know. I don't think we ever know for sure.
We see some walkers with bleeding from the eyes, which is like the visual cue that it's this flu.
Oh, so they have a sickness that they're passing on.
And Peter and I had a full discussion about like, did these walkers die of that, or did they catch it after they died?
Right.
Like, I think they probably died of it, and that's why they're passing it around to the pigs. But I don't know.
Maybe not. Maybe it's some kind of zombie sickness.
Yeah.
And mutated.
Yeah.
In terms of what else has happened over summer or summer break, Glenn and Maggie are having a little pregnancy scare. Beth has a boyfriend who's played by Kyle Gallner, who I remember from Veronica Mars, where he played Cassidy. I always like him when he's in things, so it was really nice to see him in this show.
And then not so nice.
Yeah, and then not so nice, and a shame that we only have him for one episode.
Yeah.
Bob Stuckey, who's a character in the comics but very different in the show, played by the amazing Lawrence Gilliard Jr., who we learn has just kind of joined the group. There's such a nice scene of Michonne returning and the Grimes boys being really happy. So that's kind of scene set. She's really settled in, but she's still looking for the governor. And then the other thing we're introduced to is Lizzie and Mika, who I'd forgotten about until we see them. And that whole storyline that's going to play out in a big way in this particular season. So I felt like the scene setting was just great. I felt like I was seeing old friends, being reminded of things I've really enjoyed about the show, and getting to kind of relive those moments. So I think Gimple did a really good job of following on from what Karen said about visually indicating where we're at, sort of doing it with these little character interactions as well, and kind of setting that up for the rest of the season and for this episode.
And I think each one of these it's scene setting, and it's sort of checking in, getting a feel for where people are psychologically, people we know, getting a feel for where they are, and then kind of learning a little bit more about new people, like Tyrese at the fence not wanting to kill the zombies face to face shows his sensitivity. Everything we talked about with Rick tells where he's at psychologically, wanting to sort of, like, I like the way you put it best, Karen, about rather than being a pacifist, just not wanting to risk like losing himself and going, I forget exactly what you said, but he doesn't want to, he sees these harbingers. I mean, he hasn't seen this woman Clara yet, but he saw Morgan, and he's like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to end up like that, going so far that I can't come back from
his humanity.
Preserving his humanity. That's what you said. The Carol and Daryl thing, just showing how their relationship has settled into this sort of brother-sister kind of a thing. Beth with her boyfriend, she is very nonchalant about saying goodbye to him, and nonchalant kind of after he dies. She's she's sad, but as she tells Carol, I can't cry. And so that's just sort of showing that she's getting inured to all of this. Also, I felt with her that she felt more present. And I think this is the season where she really comes forth as a character in her own right rather than part of somebody else's story. And it reminds me of remembering seeing a lot of Beth cosplay at the Walker Stalker cons going forward. With Michonne and Rick and Carl, she brings them gifts, comics for Carl and a razor for Rick, and they say, glad to see you, Michonne, glad to see you too. And then she goes, I found this, your face is losing the war. And I'm like, flirt.
Well, there's this scene in Alexandria where Rick comes out clean shaven and Michonne's like, ooh. So, like, maybe Michonne likes a clean shaven dude. I don't know. I mean, she's picked the wrong one if she does, but like, yeah.
It's kind of funny because I had a friend over the last couple of days, my friend Dan, and he used my razor without telling me, and he didn't put the little attachment back on. So when I started shaving, I had a much cleaner shave than I usually have right now because of that.
I was going to say, Jason's face is not losing the war. He's very clean shaven today.
Yeah, no likey.
No likey.
It looks good.
Yeah, I thought it was just a new thing for the year.
Lizzie and Mika, I mean, we were first meeting them, but right off the bat, they're like naming all the "Hi, Nick" to the zombies and everything.
Those little girls.
So hilarious. And Carl's so pissed, and he doesn't want kids humanizing the zombies because he thinks that's dangerous. And I think that's a great dynamic. I love the moment with Zach guessing what Daryl did before the apocalypse.
So funny.
Saying he's a cop, and Daryl going along with it, and then Michonne laughing, and Daryl's like, "What's so funny?" But thinking about that, I'm like, the real answer is that he just hunted for food and did scams with Merle, right? I don't think he ever had a job, but we'll never know because Zach.
Yeah, they never mention it because I think Mercer asks him as well in season 11, and he's like, "It doesn't matter what happened."
And then Glenn and Maggie, I feel like that's about Glenn being, we might say, overly cautious, anxious, worried. His heart's in the right place, but, not wanting her to go on the supply run, just knowing how she's always been a badass, but knowing how independent she becomes after he leaves, it feels weird to see him trying to kind of rein her in. It's like, dude, don't even. And then when she tells him that she's not pregnant, and he's so relieved. And she's like, we could have done it. And she wants to live. He says, being afraid is what's kept us alive. No, she goes, no, it's how we kept breathing. So that shows where they're at, where he's just really worried, but she's thinking about wanting to enjoy life again.
It's interesting because Glenn has pushed back against like uncertainty before. Like just a few months ago, he was asking for Maggie's hand in marriage, knowing that they were going to go into war. So like, why wasn't he scared about that? I guess it's different when your wife might die in pregnancy and then your baby might be a zombie too. So,
I mean, he's decided to step up and be there for her. So I could see marriage fitting into that. But in his mind, being there for her is protecting her, which means not letting her go out or leave his sight, or, I mean, pregnancy is a little bit of a different thing, but not bringing somebody else into the world that they'll have to worry about.
Mm-hmm. True.
It is also, I think, the ethics of having a child in the apocalypse.
Yeah.
I'm not throwing shade at any of our listeners out there who have chosen to have a child in the apocalypse. That's your choice. But it is like, you see that more explicitly with Laurie and Rick in season 2, where she talks about bringing a child into the world for a short, cruel life.
Yeah.
And I think there is even like, some people I know who both have and don't have children talk about the ethics and the fears they have around things like climate change and what kind of life a child is going to have in it. And there's no easy or right answer to it. But I think for Glenn, that is a terrifying thought. And of course, they're all coming off the bat. I mean, you'd think if I was going to Department of Suspension of Disbelief it a little bit, I might have thought Maggie would be a bit more reticent, given that she had to literally deliver Judith.
Yeah.
Like,
my thoughts too.
murder Laurie, but she's a tough cookie, so that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's
and now Judith is
this
question. Cute little baby, so maybe she's like, it was worth it.
Who's wearing a hat, a little hat, it's so cute.
Do you think that Maggie should go, if she, or anyone who wants to have a baby in this new reality, that they should need to go and talk to everybody and get buy-in from the council or whatever before they do it?
That seems very Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely their choice.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is I think it's okay to have doubts about it.
I just think it's at least debatable in this situation because they're in such a precarious situation where resources are scarce and having a baby could impact the group. But yeah, I know that is
no, that's interesting though. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I guess.
Okay. Let me do my first point because I was just sort of responding to Lucy here. But mine is the 3 questions. So this is the debut of the 3 questions that our group uses to vet new people. And how many walkers have you killed? How many people and why? And Rick's helping this woman, Clara, even though she seems sketchy because he's in helping mode, I think. And after we saw him leave the orange backpack guy at the side of the road last season, and then he saw Morgan, who had lost his humanity, gone into killing mode, and Rick realized he didn't want to continue on his path that way, so he decided to shift gears, bring in the Woodburyans after the governor was a threat to them. And now we can see their group has been bringing in new people like Bob and others. And I like that they sort of touch on it not being all about compassion. It's also about being smart. I think when you relate it to losing your humanity, there is still a compassion component there, but it's also about being smart because Clara says, her husband Eddie showed her things she had to be willing to do in this reality, like eating animal carcasses and rotten fruit, leaving people behind, hiding from people who needed her help. And then she goes, unlike you. And Rick says, this is not charity. You have to have numbers. People are the best defense against walkers or people. We help each other. And so that's always my point with this stuff, that helping each other is about compassion, but it's also in all of our own best interests to help each other rather than to see everyone else as enemies, because then that's going to be the reality. We are all enemies. Or if we try to see each other as friends and make friends, then we will all be friends. So I think that's what Rick, at least right now, is realizing. So anyway, I just bring that up, and just because it all relates to it, you wouldn't need the 3 questions unless you were in that mode of bringing people in, but wanting to vet them and make sure they're safe. And so she answers the 3 questions. How many walkers have you killed? Well, Eddie killed them all until he died. How many people? Just herself, because she just stabbed herself. Why? She says you don't get to come back from things. But I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, but just what makes these 3 questions, because I remember when I first heard them, I thought, that's kind of dumb. You'd have better questions than this. And when they get to the Commonwealth, they have a ton of questions. But just trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. They feel very Gimple-ish. But just how many walkers have you killed, I think, is about just getting a sense of how much experience and skill they have and willingness to kill the walkers, because as we see throughout the series, they tend to run into people who, for whatever reason, have been shielded from it. And it's probably, I would guess, better if people have killed a lot of walkers so they'd know that they'd be an asset. I don't know. That's just speculation. How many people, on the other hand, is more about, like, are you a good or a bad person? And that those 2 last questions pair together, how many people and why? Because if they've killed a lot of people, then they want to know why. Was it for a good reason, which there are good reasons. And in fact, I think if somebody had killed people for a good reason, that might actually be a plus, depending on the situation in this world. But more important probably is if you killed people because you just felt like it or whatever. I mean, the big flaw in all of this is that people could lie, of course. If you killed a bunch of people just because you felt like it, you wouldn't say that.
But I guess Yeah, by asking people those questions, you can sometimes read whether someone's lying or not. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
I was gonna say to Lucy's point, I think it's like the manner in which people answer his questions. That's what he's assessing, not necessarily the answers that they're giving him. I think he's looking for like how they answer the questions. Do they answer with regret in their voice, or like their body language? Does it show like pride in killing people or pride in killing all the walkers? Even if you're killing walkers, like that does something to your humanity too. So like,
as Tyrese shows, he doesn't want to.
Yeah. So like, do they bristle or are they defensive when they're answering? I think at this point in the apocalypse, like everybody has killed somebody or killed walkers maybe. So it's really the why is probably the only the answer that like the literal answer matters. But I don't know. Scott Gimple also said that he created the 3 questions as a tool to showcase the fluidity of morality. So like, I don't know. But I agree with you.
What do you mean? I don't quite understand that. Like
it's relative. Like it's not have you killed people, it's how many have you killed. So there's no judgment for the killing of people.
Got it.
It's more about the context in which you did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that would be my understanding anyway. I might be wrong.
I'm going to go with Lucy because that
makes sense
right.
to me, yeah.
Well, Scott and I are close.
And that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, if you killed people just because you felt like it, that's not so great. But if you killed people because there were some bad people who were about to kill a bunch of children and you killed them first, then that's a different context.
And it's interesting because I was here for season 306 where they started asking those questions. Jim was the one who asked the questions on the phone. When Rick was going insane on the phone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He got it from his own insane mind.
His own psyche. Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot about that. I'm so glad you remembered that. Yeah, because I was like, we don't know for sure who came up with those, but it was sort of Rick.
Yeah. So I'm even questioning, I think this is a stretch, but I'm even questioning if Clara is a figment of Rick's imagination because nobody else saw her. And like he's still struggling himself with the bad things he's done and if he can come back. So I don't know
I think maybe now that you mention it, maybe we talked about that on the podcast before 10 years ago or whatever. But I think that probably not, but maybe. I think it could be that, yeah.
We do see her again, though. We see her in when the prison is overrun, so we realize at that point that Rick didn't finish her off.
Yeah.
Out of compassion, I hope. Yeah, he honored her wish.
Yeah, she wanted to be a zombie with her husband.
But also, if we're going along with the theory that she is a figment of his imagination, when he finally understands that we can come back from the bad things we've done, because he says that right before Herschel gets killed, and then we see Herschel smile because he knows that Rick has finally realized that. Then Clara comes back, so it's like a book ending. I'm reading too much into it, but yeah.
No, I like that.
You're not. That's absolutely,
that.
I'm sure that's why that happened in that order. But it still could have been a figment, of his imagination. Yeah. But before we move on to anything else, just to wrap this point up, the fact that this is the first time we hear the 3 questions, I think shows that there's a new first time outside of Rick's hallucination, is that there's a new focus on bringing strangers into the group who need to be vetted. And that's a focus of the show from now on. I mean, most of these new people end up dying, but when they get to Alexandria, it comes back again, and the Commonwealth. And I think that's significant because a big theme of the show is about whether you can trust new people, going back to Randall, and it's always been about that. And so I like that the show was about larger and larger communities as it went along. And I like the feeling of the larger community in this show. It ends up being a false start, I think, because they lose everyone except Bob, if I remember right. But then Alexandria, Hilltop, Commonwealth. So it's sort of, we're coming back to this rewatch. You can see this is a step in the progression of the show.
Yeah.
With communities. All right. Karen.
That it goes right into my next point of you're mentioning communities, but I like how this episode is kind of playing with the question of isolation versus community. Which one is better? It kind of turns that it turns something on its head. I'll explain soon that in previous seasons, and like it's almost a given that community prevails over isolation, because Daryl tells Merle in the previous season we can't make it without people anymore. Andrea says the same thing before she dies, like we can't make it alone, and Daryl says I never could. And like Jason just said, Rick tells Clara you have to have numbers. People are the best defense against walkers or people. But now coming together and surviving the apocalypse together is actually what's going to bring about their downfall, because there's a disease on the loose. There's plague and pestilence now. And I think it's really clever that the show is doing that, because if the survivors have already semi-controlled the walkers, it's time to weaponize our character's greatest asset, which is being physically close and harmonious. And so they're making each person a vector of disease. And so the show, I think, is asking, what are the dangers of being alone? What are the dangers that arise from being in a community and surviving together? Like, I like that the show doesn't take community for granted. Rather, it examines that question from various angles, like really challenging the assumptions that just because you're part of a community that you're set for life, that you're good. But in this episode, without community, we see that one goes insane and destitute, just like Clara is. She goes insane. But with community, the virus will spread. So there's no easy answers here. And this question gets examined over and over again because our characters get separated in various ways, either by quarantine or by dispersing after the fall of the prison. I mean, I think the latter half of season 4, they're all separated, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's because the governor comes and
right.
They all scatter.
So there literally is an episode later on in the season called Alone about Bob Stuckey. And we also know that Daryl later on finds a community called the Claimers, but the Claimers don't benefit him either. They only hurt him. So again, in that instance, is it isolation better for Daryl or is community better? So I think the show wants us to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that this show is good at just being relentlessly bleak. So that when it, when Sophia in the barn showed us what kind of show this is kind of another instance of that, where it's like, oh, look, they seem to have all their shit together. And as you said, the walkers are semi-controlled. How can we really fuck that up?
Right.
And it's like, just when you think you have it all together, something comes from an unexpected direction.
Yeah. And I remember Entertainment Weekly had a YouTube segment that asked Stephen Yeun and Lauren Cohan, would Glenn and Maggie rather be safe but separated or trapped together and in danger? And both actors answered that they would prefer to be trapped but together because, as Stephen put it, your world is the people that you love. And if you're not with them, what's the point of continuing on?
And I think another thing that what you're saying really brings up that I should touch on more when I talk about the importance of trust and being friends and everything is it needs to be the right people, because some people can't be trusted and aren't your friends. And so I guess my point is, if you go through the world sort of by default seeing everyone as an adversary, then there are going to be some people who would have been friends that are going to be your adversaries. But on the other side of that coin, you can't just go around trusting everyone, because you're that's just as dangerous. You have to have a good vetting process, probably better than these 3 questions, more like Commonwealth.
Yeah. And then the last sub point I'll make about that is that Clara says she couldn't be without Eddie, her husband, the head of her husband at all. So she kept the head as a companion. And it seems like really insane, but if I think about it, I start to empathize with her, because it reminds me of that Tom Hanks film Castaway, and how he fashioned his own companion out of that volleyball and called it Wilson. And he drew a face on it so that he could have somebody to talk to. And in dire straits like that, it doesn't seem insane, but very human to like anthropomorphize whatever you have. I mean, we do that with our own pets too. Like we assign them human behaviors and attributes and stuff and human names.
My cat loves me, so I don't teach you about that.
I'm not, I don't want to poo-poo anybody. Obviously, I love pets too.
I mean, it's like the governor and his family in the barn too. And no, Herschel and his family in the barn. Governor and his daughter. People just don't want to let go of their loved ones who have turned. So that's part of it too.
Yeah.
You know, don't want to admit.
Yeah. So I think we'll see this idea of isolation versus community come up again and again. But obviously, the show still champions or like says that community is way better because we still had to have Daryl go out and get the medicine for people in the prison who are suffering from the disease.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, are there instances of anyone who's isolated and who's been better off? Because most of the time it seems like Morgan, he seems insane, this woman Clara. But what comes to mind is the cheesemaker. He seemed all right out there on his own,
goat.
you know?
He had
he had a goat, yeah.
He had a lovely goat. That episode always makes me really want a goat. They seem really fun.
Yeah, but I think it's also isolation versus community relates to the greater theme of what Maggie says later, surviving versus breathing. Because I think if you're like isolated by yourself, you're just trying to survive because you don't have people as resources. But if you're in a community, you're able to thrive like our survivors are thriving in this season.
I just think there's some people, and I think it's much more rare, but some people just want to be hermits. And
true.
I would be more inclined to say, yeah, you're better off with people, but I'm very much that way. So I guess want to hold open the possibility that for some people, maybe isolation is better. I don't know. Maybe not, though. I mean, the worst punishment in prison is to go into isolation. What do they call it?
Solitary
confinement.
Confinement.
Yeah.
Which is what I think makes me love seasons 3 and season 4 the best. Like, the prison is my favorite setting just because that building is designed to keep people compartmentalized and isolated, and yet our survivors are choosing to make a life there and have found ways to make a life there.
It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but yeah, they have this community in this area that's meant to isolate people. So there feels like there's this weird cognitive dissonance happening.
Yeah.
Well, it's also about how the world has changed, isn't it? What freedom means. Freedom means enclosure almost, because that keeps you safe from the bigger dangers. Whereas before the apocalypse, freedom meant liberty and being able to go wherever you wanted.
Good point.
It's interesting. It's an interesting twist. I'm really taken with this idea of like the dangers of community as well as the dangers of isolation. Because fundamentally, from an anthropology point of view, we do need people to survive. But the dangers of disease, because this whole storyline really reminds me of in The Stand, the Stephen King epic about post-apocalyptic society, where the apocalypse in that case was a deadly flu. They talk about the second wave, which comes... I'll try and find the quote for when we talk about the flu in more detail. It comes sort of 6 to 12 months after the initial event. And that's when people start to die of things that should be easily curable, or things that would usually have had medical attention, or other onslaughts of diseases that would usually have been kept at bay by basic things like sanitation and vaccination, so on and so forth. And I always like that in this season we look at that, and we look at what happens when things that should be no big deal can kill you and suddenly become life-threatening. And a big part of that is community and the spread of disease, and how do we keep animals and water and humans all in the same place safe and
sanitary, yeah.
Sanitary, yeah. And we see that again in Alexandria in seasons 9 and 10 when the Whisperers fuck with the water supply. like something as simple as the water supply can be the difference between life and death. And I like that these bigger questions are kind of coming into it now. And I think you articulated that really well, Karen. I've got my thinky face on.
With Community also, there's pros and cons. With Community comes complications, more responsibility to take care of more people, different egos or drives. Yeah, like how do you govern and get everybody? It's harder to get everybody on the same page. And so, having a good system is important, having good organization that will sort of encourage good behaviors, all this kind of things to think about with a big community that you don't need to think about as much with smaller groups or just by yourself.
Yeah. And morality and ethics and what do we value and what do we stand for and how do we operate, and there's so much to it. It's fascinating.
And when you got a guy like Daryl around, it's important for him to be a role model because everyone looks up to him so much as he would not like to have that. And I kind of love that little dynamic where we saw everyone adoring him. I feel like they're kind of stand-ins for the fans of the series at this point. I think Gimple was probably inspired by the fan reaction to Daryl to have everybody on the show start acting like that too. So funny.
Well, one of the facts I have in my IMDb dive is that Gimple directed the actor playing Patrick to act as though he was meeting a rock star. Like that was the level of devotion he felt Daryl would inspire in the people there, and that's really cool.
I think Gimple directed Patrick to act like somebody who met Norman Reedus while after us having in Spain having a massage or something, whatever.
Patrick kept his boobs in.
Patrick's like, I do a podcast about you, Daryl. But you're talking about Nicotero, right? I think Nicotero directed it.
Yeah. I wouldn't get my boobs out for Greg Nicotero, sorry. Actually, I don't know, maybe. Anyway, moving on.
He's a cool guy. He's married. All right. Next, Lucy.
Let's have a look at my list. I'll be honest, I've always found the stuff with Clara quite annoying in this episode. I like the questions and I like the way that's kind of introduced in this episode, but I've always found her a bit weird in this episode. Like she just doesn't quite weird. Fit tonally. Even just things like her being Irish feels really strange. And I know like her story makes sense. Like there must have been people who were stuck in airports when the apocalypse came. That's a huge part of Station 11. But it's one of those elements of this episode that I like the least is her kind of arc. I like it more in the sense of, as we said, it kind of bookends the episode 1 and episode 8 where we see that Rick didn't finish her off. But I've always found her, and it's no shade against the actress because she's a really great actress. I think one of the pieces of feedback we have this week is that she's actually in Better Call Saul or something.
Yeah, she's Mike Ehrmantraut's daughter and Stacy, and she's played by Carrie Condon.
Yeah, Carrie Condon is great, but I've always found it feels like a weird appendix to this episode. So that's something that I have always found probably the weakest part of it, is that interaction between Rick and her. And I actually like the idea that she doesn't exist because that would give it a bit more meaning than I feel it kind of has in this episode as a whole. But I think I might be in the minority there, and it might just be a personal, like, it just didn't quite work for me.
No, I think she's supposed to make you feel like something's off because even with the Irish accent, maybe that's why like you can't quite pinpoint what's off about it, but it just makes you're like the hair stand up on your skin.
Those Irish people, it's just
that's not what I mean.
Hey, Derek.
Oh yeah. Derek.
No, I know that's not what you mean. Just
it's
different.
The uncanniness of it. It's like, oh, okay, oh, this is a bit surreal. Oh, okay, that's weird. Right. Okay. It's an odd one. So yeah, to me, if I had to pick a low point of the episode, that would probably be it for me.
I wouldn't say it's a low point for me. It did make me uncomfortable. She's so dirty that she looks like a zombie, and she's so needy. She's got this needy energy, and that usually repels me, that kind of energy. She's very sketchy and untrustworthy. Rick clearly doesn't know if he can trust her, but he's really trying to be the kind of person that helps people at this point. And she's talking about having had to do bad things. And I think she's supposed to represent, the person who's gone really far. I mean, the whole theme, I would say you could consider the core theme of The Walking Dead to be, can you come back from the dark things that you've done? There's a lot of themes, but maybe that's at least one of the core themes. And she really just sort of is the human representation of that. Yeah. And so when he's looking at her, and she couldn't come back from it, she killed herself rather than try to come back. And I think that's one reason why Rick screamed no, because he wants to feel like he's not going to go there and that he can come back from the things that he already did. And so I think he wants external proof that that's possible too. And so to see somebody not be able to come back for it is kind of bad news for him. That's like a selfish reason to not want her to kill herself. He probably also just didn't want anyone to kill themselves, which is an upstanding thing to do, given that she just tried to stab him with the knife that he trusted her to keep. But anyway, then I think he does leave her as a Zed just to honor her last wish. Let me be like him. Let me be with him. And then at the end, Rick says to Herschel how that woman wound up. I guess I got close to that. If I lost Carl and Judas, if I lost this place. And Herschel says, not then, not even then. You came back. Your boy came back. You get to come back. You do. And one thing I really like about that is he mentions Carl. Carl came back. So I think that's something that they're indicating happened in that 6-month time jump, because last we saw Carl, he had just shot that kid and was like bragging about it and not liking that Rick was bringing people in from Woodbury. But just speculation, I presume that within that time he's come around and he's always modeling his dad. So maybe he respected that his dad had a change of heart and he had a change of heart too. Because if I remember right, that whole psycho aspect of Carl is gone from now on, which I'm relieved by, if that's true, right? He's over it. He's now a compassionate person.
He kind of goes crazy after Glenn and Abraham die. And then he wants to go into the sanctuary to kill Negan.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Then all of a sudden he flips again. But yeah.
Flip-flop. See, it happens to all of them. But then, just thinking about it, can you come back? And I think after all is said and done, it's a major theme of the show. And after all is said and done, I think the show is saying you can come back. Rick did, Carl did, Michonne, Eugene, I would say, Aaron, and Daryl, yes, except now he's like stabbing people gleefully in the Daryl show sometimes. But I think that's more about the writing than anything about commenting on this theme.
Yeah.
So I think that theme is so worn. I got so sick of it. But even at this point, I think I was starting to maybe get tired of it. I can't remember for sure. But maybe that's another reason not to like this little story arc. I'm trying to decide if even though it made me feel uncomfortable and I was annoyed at the character, this woman, Clara, whether I think it was a good story element, and it might be a little superfluous or something,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think it is superfluous because I think what bothers me about this segment is that she literally states the themes. Can you come back?
I know.
Oh.
And because when he asked the third question, why did you kill people? Yeah. And she says, because you can't come back. I was already thinking that. I hate when I'm already thinking something and then a character says it. It's like, oh, you think I'm not smart enough to figure this out.
Yeah. Except I'm not smart enough to figure out when Rick says to her, if you try anything, you'll be the one who loses. And then she says, I don't have anything to lose. And then Rick says, no, you do.
You do.
Was he talking about both her physical life and her humanity? Or I don't know.
I just thought he meant your life. I'm going to kill you if you fuck with me.
But okay, if she tries to kill Rick, he'll kill her and take her physical life. But if she's successful in killing Rick, she'll lose her humanity too. And also, I guess, Well, I don't know.
I mean, if you want to look at it on a deeper level, I think he could have meant that, which kind of goes along with him being sad that she killed herself, because if he still thinks she has humanity left to lose, or even the opportunity to come back from it, that would be a loss, then that could be what he meant. Like, you can still come back from this. Saying you have something to lose is another way of saying you can come back from this if you do the right thing right now.
I think you're both missing that she's also holding his sandwich, so you could lose that.
Yeah, that would be
good sandwich.
Yeah.
A major tragedy. There's nothing like a good sandwich.
Truly.
And that is the major theme of the show.
And that is the major theme.
Who's next?
Me. No, I spoke about how I didn't like the Irish lady.
Okay. Well, I think I went on long enough. So, Karen, do you have any more points?
I do have a point. I'm going to try to keep it short, but it's kind of long. All right. So, since we open with Rick as a farmer, it made me, and Herschel also says to Rick, "You're growing us enough food, so we won't need to do runs anymore." Yeah, we won't have to go out to do runs soon. It reminded me of Jared Diamond's book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. Have you guys read it or heard of it? Okay, so yeah, the Germ Smart 2 also relates to this episode, but it basically is a book about why some settlements thrived towards civilization and why some did not, and why some societies advanced quickly with technology and goods and quality of life while others didn't. And Diamond's thesis is basically where farming emerged, a relatively advanced civilization followed. So hunter-gatherers don't actually produce as much food needed for caloric satisfaction as farmers do.
Is that the farmer's big ass comment? Is that related? That's what you're talking about?
Oh.
When
Herschel says that to Rick.
Herschel said, yeah, you need overalls, a piece of hay or whatever, and a big ass.
Yeah, but before he says that, he tells Rick, "You're growing us enough food, so we won't have to go on runs soon."
I just didn't understand why it was stereotypical for a farmer to have a big ass, but maybe it's because there's plenty of food. I don't know. Yeah,
there's a constant food source, which is the thesis of this book, and it's theoretical, not empirical. So farmers were able to leave the nomadic life and domesticate things like grain and build silos to keep them safe from moisture, from bugs, from other animals. And they brought their goods and foods back to a centralized camp. So it's kind of like Daryl going on runs and scavenging and bringing stuff back. And larger civilizations thrived because they were adopting these techniques. And the inequalities of the world were born from the different crops that we eat. So what kind of crops were farmed matters. Some seeds and plants offer different nutrition, and the sowing and harvesting cycles are different. So some plants had diminishing returns, right? It's not worth it to plant some crops because caloric expenditure there. Like it doesn't give enough calories as it takes when you plant them. So later on in season 6, we see Maggie talking with Gregory about Alexandria's tomatoes and cucumbers, which are pretty calorically insufficient versus all the flora and fauna that Hilltop had and was able to grow. And I think later on Hilltop becomes the main farming community because...
Yeah, Hilltop's always the bread basket, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the bread basket. So when they're trading, Hilltop's the one responsible for the food. So, okay, I'm almost done. Sorry.
No, this is great. I love it.
Okay, and it leads to with crops, like man's relationship with animals and growing them as a meat source also makes a difference in whether or not some settlements flourished or some settlements, dispersed and weren't able to survive. Animal domestication was super important. Because it's not just for meat, but for milk protein, for fur and hide, to make clothes and keep warm. And pigs are actually not very good to have because they only give meat. They can't, but they're not like some animals are like force multipliers where they can carry heavy loads and plow the land and be used for transportation. As we see later on, they have horses in Hilltop and Alexandria, right? And also in the kingdom, they have horses to help them rebuild. So pigs are actually that ideal to domesticate. And Shiva was not very ideal to have either because it's hard to domesticate carnivores and also like just to keep them fed.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
So these non-efficient things like tomatoes or pigs, do they become more prevalent when there's just so much, there's so many resources, that resources are plenty and people can afford to spend them more on these luxuries kind of thing?
Yes. Yeah. It's another indication that our survivors are progressing up the every time I come on the podcast we mention Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I mention it a lot too when you're not
to progress upwards on the pyramid. It's better to be a settled farming community than it is to be nomadic, like the Whisperers were nomadic, right?
Yeah.
So
that's their twisted ascetic philosophy.
Yeah, and I think the sanctuary, even like you couldn't grow anything at the sanctuary. That's why Negan was a mobster and robbed other communities. So
there was a sandwich there too, Dwight's.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right.
High point of the show.
It's fascinating because like where I grew up is a super big farming region of Scotland, and reliance on any one thing can cost you dearly. Like I remember in the 90s, there was an outbreak of foot and mouth disease that basically decimated the farming industry in that part of Scotland. Like huge cattle herds were getting culled. People I knew whose parents were farmers, they were like having to retrain as like late in life, like in their 40s and 50s, having to retrain for jobs in industry that they'd never had before. And then you go to other places, like when I was in Iceland, I remember being surprised that like they eat so much lamb and sheep there, but that's because lamb and sheep can survive in the Icelandic wilderness. Like they don't need a lot of the things that are lacking there, so they can live in these amazing volcanic, rugged places and just get on with it. And it's interesting to think about. And I put that book immediately on my wish list because I want to read more about it. Yeah, the kinds of crops and things we have, because even basic things like a pig, you don't get milk. Like things like a cow, they're tending to the land, you're getting milk from them, you can make cheese, you can do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I am also reminded that my favorite video game is Stardew Valley, where you get to run your own farm. And I often diversify my cattle and pigs and sheep, just to make sure that I'm covering all my bases.
And I guess the pig is like in this, maybe they considered what you're saying, but they took poetic license and included the pig because it was a harbinger of this sickness.
Yeah.
But right, or they could have maybe had another animal that made more sense. I don't know.
Bird flu, chickens.
Oh yeah, they could have chickens. But lambs and cattle are easier to manage. Like they're more efficient because there is a social hierarchy within those animals because there's herd mentality with them. So you only have to control one of them and then everybody else will follow.
The leader?
Yeah, versus pigs.
So when they're herding lambs and cattle, do they know who the alpha cow is? And
the alpha
kind of.
They can like just control that one?
Yeah, kind of.
But pigs are all kind of independent.
Yeah, but as Lucy mentioned, I think, and what Jason just said, the harbinger of the disease, like that is probably how the plague started in